If you get something back that's redacted, immediately appeal, challenge the integrity of the search, and try to make an argument for why this information is in the public interest. Hey, I'm Jason Leopold. I'm an investigative reporter for Vice News. I cover national security, counterterrorism, civil liberties, and I aggressively use the Freedom of Information Act to shed light on these issues. And I'm here to take your questions.
Hey, Jason, thanks for coming on today.
Hey.
So, first person we have is Kevin, who's calling us on Skype. So let's say hey to Kevin.
Hey, Kevin. How's it going?
Hi, Jason. I'm doing great. So my question for you is, how do you handle situations where you've made FOIA requests only to get a heavily redacted document? Do you find this useful, and kind of where do you go from there?
I'm sorry, Kevin, part of your question cut out. Mike, can you repeat that?
I think basically the gist of it there is that Kevin's wondering how you handle FOIA requests when you get heavily redacted documents. And, how common is that, I guess?
It's really common. First of all, you should know that back in 2009, when President Obama came into office, he signed this executive order. And this executive order said, that he was going to usher in a new era of transparency in open government, largely because the previous administration, the Bush administration, had been so secretive. Attorney General Eric Holder issued these new guidelines, which essentially said that all of these government agencies, have to act on a presumption of openness. That means that they have to make these, certain documents available. In response to FOIA requests. What's actually happened over the past 6 years is that it's gotten worse, arguably worse than what the Bush administration did. And we're seeing that the government withholds documents largely to protect themselves from embarrassment or fear, and they use the national security card often. Recently, a FOIA request that I filed and a subsequent lawsuit resulted in more than 150 pages of redacted documents in response to the NSA did the Defense Intelligence Agency did this analysis on the leaks by Edward Snowden, the leaks that took place, and they wanted to see what kind of damage resulted. So this was unbelievable. I got literally 150 pages of redacted documents. The great thing about FOIA, though, is that you get the opportunity to appeal it. You get the opportunity to keep going back and back and back and forth and to fight. It's such an empowering tool because of what it affords the requesters. So, I use it obviously very aggressively, to try to tell these stories. But what I always try to advise people and tell them is that, if you get something back that's redacted, immediately appeal, challenge the integrity of the search, appeal all the withholdings, and try to make an argument for why this information is in the public interest. I think oftentimes people just throw up their hands and say, I don't want to deal with it. It's a tedious process, but if you know going into it that it's a very empowering tool that you have in front of you, you could find some great success. I've appealed many FOIA requests and have actually gotten some of these government agencies to take another look and to unredact some of these documents. And very quickly, I also want to note that in addition to the Freedom of Information Act, and this is part of it, there's something called mandatory declassification review. And what that means is that if you know a particular document that you want to get, if you know that, for example, the CIA has a report and it's classified, you can actually file what's known as a mandatory declassification review. That basically means that a board gets together and they determine whether or not this certain document can be declassified under this law. And the statistics actually are much greater for mandatory declassification reviews versus FOIA. So, again, it gets a little bit wonky. This is a lot this is a lot of info for the FOIA nerds, but I hope that others will sort of look into that and take advantage of it. So, and by the way, one last thing is that you also have an opportunity to appeal to a FOIA ombudsman. If something is withheld or heavily redacted, and the government agency says, well, that's it. We're not giving you anything. There's a FOIA ombudsman that you could work with that's actually a liaison with these government agencies. That's sort of, in lieu of filing a lawsuit. So there's a lot of tools out there that are beneficial to a requester that you could take advantage of. And that's a great question. Thanks for asking.
Hey, so great answer, Jason. So we got a kind of fun tweet that came in that I want you to take a look at. So Fast98 Dodge asked, how do you pick which concert t-shirt to wear at Guantanamo? So I think he's kind of getting at the Guantanamo work you've done. So I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Can you tell us a little bit about the work Vice News has done regarding Guantanamo?
Sure. So, Guantanamo is just a complete black hole of secrecy. And it's virtually impossible to get anything out of Guantanamo. They have the motto, they have a couple of mottos. One is fairness, transparency, justice, which was changed over the years from something else. But that second word, transparency, is just laughable because they're anything but transparent. And so what I've done is I've actually used the Freedom of Information Act to pry loose documents from Guantanamo to shed light on what actually takes place behind the scenes with regard to the operations there. And here's an example. Last year, we obtained the standard operating procedure for hunger strikes there. And basically, this is sort of the guidebook that the guards and the medical team at Guantanamo follow when detainees are on hunger strike or when they have to be force-fed. And what was amazing about this document is that it showed that they were getting such negative publicity revolving around hunger strikes. So what they did is they changed the name from hunger strikes to long-term non-religious fasts. And again, long-term non-religious fast. And that was buried in this document, but we wouldn't have received that if we didn't use the Freedom of Information Act to get that. I mean, a couple of other, great success stories we had is, there was a massive hunger strike there in 2013. And more than 100 detainees were being force-fed. We actually got the document to find out, one, how much liquid nutritional supplement they were forcing these detainees to ingest, how much money they spent on it, which was over $300,000. And in addition to that, what flavor they liked. Vanilla apparently is the most popular flavor. So that was a great little tidbit of info there. But in terms of Fast98 Dodge's question about how I pick which t-shirt to wear, it's a very lengthy process that I go through. I look through all my concert t-shirts, or try to find something that is more or less ironic or represents the exact opposite of what Guantanamo is. One picture that I use as my Twitter avatar is I'm standing outside of Guantanamo wearing a Black Flag t-shirt, and I just felt that was sort of ironic. Black Flag, Camp Justice. And what's funny about that is that after that picture was taken, I heard that some of the folks at Guantanamo were kind of pissed off because they thought that it represented the black flag of Al Qaeda, which was the most stunning thing that I've ever heard. I'm like, you guys don't know, Black Flag, and apparently they didn't. Another one was, Jello Biafra and the Guantanamo School of Medicine. That was, that was one that was really happy to be photographed in. And then the band War, Why Can't We Be Friends? I felt that was a nice message to convey. So thanks for the question.
So that's a good one, man. So hey, listen, I want to pull up another one of our Skype guys. We have Sean Musgrave, who you may or may not be familiar with, calling us from Boston, Mass. So
hey, Sean. How's it going, Sean? Great to see you.
Yeah, doing good, Jason. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for being on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to go back to what you said about the non-religious long-term fasts or long-term non-religious fasts, and
talk
about lingo, because lingo and jargon, because this is something that I encounter a lot in my investigative work, also around national security and law enforcement in particular, is that I don't necessarily know what document to ask for in the first place, because so much jargon and lingo is being thrown around, and particularly acronyms that I don't know about. So what are some good tips that you can give around like structural kind of basic documents if you're first diving into a topic? Like you mentioned, standard operating procedures, any other type of basic document that can really help you get a quick introduction to a topic of government on a particular government agency or program?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Let me just say, Sean, for viewers out there, Sean does great work with Muckrock. It's a great little site that handles FOIA requests, and thanks for all your hard work, Sean. That's a good question. I mean, with Guantanamo, before I file any requests, first of all, I try to dig in deep to know what I'm asking for. I don't usually go in blindly and say,
absolutely,
just give me whatever you have on such a topic. So I try to look into court documents.
Right.
I look into newspaper articles. For example, lingo at Guantanamo, they don't use the phrase force feeding. They use enteral feeding. So if I'm asking for anything, it has to be sort of using that phrase. And how you find out about it is certainly you get the banter back and forth, but you see in newspaper articles how some of these government officials actually describe whether it's a standard operating procedure, but you get to see what their talking points are. So
right.
that actually...
Sorry to interrupt, but that I assume is useful for kind of countering the national security or law enforcement technique
right.
Argument. It's already in the public sphere, correct?
It's already in the public sphere, and I mean, this gets into sort of a little bit outside of FOIA and what helps in terms of FOIA tips. So, you're an investigative reporter. In addition to FOIA, you have sources. Oftentimes I'll just tap my sources and try to find that out. Try to find out certainly on a civil liberties issue. What are they talking about behind the scenes? What is being discussed? What keywords are they using? If they're referring to, here's a great example, Occupy Wall Street. When I filed the first request for Occupy Wall Street documents, the FBI came back and said that they didn't have any documents on Occupy Wall Street. None.
I got the same answer on my initial drones request, that they had no drone documents whatsoever.
And so that actually led me to trying to figure out, one, why did they say they did not have any Occupy Wall Street documents? And that's because they weren't using Occupy Wall Street early on. They were using OWS, or it was in another filing system. So it kind of meant that I had to then cultivate some sources, certainly within, FBI or law enforcement, that could kind of give me a little bit of a tip, so then I can go back and ask for the right document. So, I mean, a lot of, it comes down to a lot of, research, a lot of, heavy, intensive research, some gumshoe reporting to supplement, what you're doing. But I really, try to tap into court documents. I'll sometimes, ask for talking points. As a FOIA, I'll make a FOIA request for talking points, hopefully get those sooner rather than later. And within those talking points...
You should already have talking points on hand.
Yeah, and within those talking points, you can then see, some of those keywords that they're using. So it gets to be really, very a meta FOIA, How about processing notes? Processing notes as well as I do. And this is another good tip, for FOIA requesters, is that when you file a FOIA request, you can, several weeks later, ask for the processing notes. This is the other meta part of FOIA, where you can actually file a request with an agency, cite your case number, and ask them for the processing notes, which basically provides a behind-the-scenes look on how these analysts are handling your requests, and you get to see what they're using. Whether it's keywords, drones, a great example when I filed a FOIA with Justice Department on targeted killings and the use of drones. They weren't using drones. They were using, UAV. And they weren't even using, targeted killings. They were talking about targeted strikes. So if I asked for targeted killings, they would come back and say, or they did come back and say they didn't have any documents. So it's again, this is just really important detail for a requester to know that you have to invest in the research. You have to invest in learning as much about your topic as possible. And certainly for people who are not reporters, reach out to perhaps a journalist to ask about a certain topic. Try to look on their own website. I mean, oftentimes I find that when I'm having conversations with some folks, they don't go onto the government's own website to actually do a search in there to see how they're referring to it. Press releases. I mean, it's really amazing what's actually available in the public record. That's a great question, Sean.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, the other thing that I've found specifically on the website is FOIA reading rooms, is that a lot of times an agency will post a document once enough people have asked for it, so then more people don't ask for it. So you can save yourself some time by just seeing, is the policy or procedure document or whatever already posted, like you said.
Yeah, no, that's another great tip and certainly important information. All government agencies, first of all, as you know as well as I do, they're supposed to update their FOIA reading rooms. And every government agency at the bottom, or toward the side of their website, they'll have various links. It'll say contact, the privacy policy, and then it'll say FOIA. And if you click on FOIA, it will take you to a reading room. In fact, yesterday I was over at the Defense Intelligence Agency's FOIA reading room. They just posted some new documents there with regard to Russia. Those are avenues that are rarely tapped because people don't actually know it exists. I'm not sure why. But in addition to that, FOIA Online, which is sort of that portal where you can make requests for certain government agencies. They actually make some of those documents available that they've already doled out to requesters. So the EPA, for example, you can actually look at all the documents and requests that have come through and see what they've posted. And again, journalists are not the primary source of FOIA requests. It's corporations, the general public. Journalists make up just a sliver of FOIA requests that come in. So, just to get back to your other question, FOIA logs. Sometimes when you look through the FOIA logs, you can actually see what other people are requesting. And again, not just journalists, but it may be an insider asking for a certain document on a program or using certain phrases that provide that sort of insight. So great question, Sean. Thanks. It's great to see you, and thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot.
All right. So hey, Jason, I got another face that might be familiar for you. We got a video message, a Skype video message from Mr. Bmaz. I want you to take a listen to that.
Hello, Mr. Leopold. This is Bmaz from the Empty Wheel blog. I know that in all your FOIA activities, you've gotten several Glomar responses. My question for you is, have you ever thought about FOIAing old and still classified or withheld details on the actual Glomar Explorer? Because wouldn't it be wonderful to have a Glomar response on the actual Glomar case? That you could really put up on your wall in a frame. So I ask you, would you consider doing that, sir?
So great to see my buddy Bmaz looking sharp in a tie there. Thanks for the question, Bmaz, and thanks for taking the time to send in your video message. That's going to be my number one priority after we wrap up here. And just for some background, the Glomar. All FOIA requesters, at one time or another, perhaps will get a Glomar response. And the Glomar, it's funny. It's named after the Glomar submarine destroyer that sank. The CIA had some involvement with it. Journalists back in the 70s were asking questions about the role that the CIA had in this, and the government responded at the time that they can neither confirm nor deny that there was that they had any records about whether or not they were involved. So that became known as a Glomar. When you get a response from the government to a certain FOIA request, in which they say, we can neither confirm nor deny that the records you seek exist. And if they do exist, they would be properly withheld under a certain FOIA exemption. That's known as a Glomar. But I love that idea. I love the idea of asking for records about the Glomar, and perhaps we'll get a Glomar on that. So that's my priority when we wrap up here.
All right, man. So, hey, one more tweet for you. This one's been in the news a lot recently. Katie McLaughlin wants to know, if a government official uses their personal email account for official business, would those records be subject to FOIA requests?
That's a really great question, and it certainly hits on some issues, obviously, that are taking place right now. Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton used a private email account during her entire 4 years as she served as Secretary of State. Now, yes, the short answer is yes, absolutely. Those emails would be subject to FOIA. So you'd file your request. You'd ask the government agency that you want. For example, Hillary Clinton's emails. In fact, we filed a lawsuit here at Vice News before this whole Clinton thing blew up, asking for that. Asking not just for her emails, but memos, documents, letters. Just to kind of get a look at what her job performance was while she was Secretary of State. And what's supposed to happen is, if you're using a private email account to conduct official government business, you're actually supposed to make those emails or a copy of them available to the government agency so they can archive them. I mean, it's part of the Federal Records Act, part of the law. And if you make a request, to the agency for the emails, what they should do, they should, go to the office, using Clinton as an example, office of the Secretary of State, and get someone to basically, get Clinton to search her emails for these, whatever the responsive emails are, and turn them over. That obviously did not happen here with Hillary Clinton, and I've spoken to many people, many former government officials who said that she was in violation. Last year I actually filed a FOIA request for former Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel's emails. Got a response back from the Department of Defense, and they said that he didn't even have an official government email account, which I found odd. After this Clinton thing blew up, some journalists started taking a look at some of the agencies, top agency officials, and whether they were adhering, to this policy. We then got a response back from the Secretary of Defense's office saying, "Oh, in fact, he did use an official, government email account, and he did have, some of his emails that he used that were turned over. So they're going back and reopening that." But I mean, it's a really, again, this is a really tedious process. FOIA sometimes does not work the way it should. The government can withhold information under 9 different exemptions: national security, privacy, what they call, this is the worst part of FOIA. This is something that I would, I hope that Congress eventually changes. This is the exemption 5, B5. It's the deliberative process, which basically means, they can say that it's part of the behind-the-scenes decision-making process, and so they're withholding it for that. That's something that Congress is hopefully going to change with some reform, a reform bill that's making its way through the various committees right now. And what that means is that certain documents would eventually be that were withheld under this exemption would eventually be subject to FOIA. I think it's 25 years later. But again, FOIA sometimes does not work the way it should. Recently, I got a document from the Department of Defense, completely redacted. I meant to cite this one when Kevin, I think, asked the question. But this is literally what came back from the Department of Defense, and up on top, toward the left-hand corner, it shows the exemption that was in place. But again, yes, this is something that hopefully the National Archives will fix. They'll get these government agencies and these government officials to collect emails that may be used from a personal account. Clearly, the State Department has failed at that. We've seen other agencies fail as well. Thanks for your question, Kate.
Hey, man, so we're almost at the end of the show, but I want you to talk to a Mr. Al-Sharif Nassif, who's calling us from Cincinnati, Ohio. So let's say hey to Sharif.
Hey, Sharif, how's it going?
Hey, what's going on, Jason?
Good to have you here.
Hey, glad to hear some of your expertise. So right now, I'm a grassroots advocate for an environmental group, but I'm kind of a young budding journalist as well, and I'm wondering. I have a couple of questions, but the first question is, what would be your what do you think would be the best resource to sort of guide someone to becoming equipped and capable of filing a FOIA request? Like, where do you think where's a good place to start?
Great question. First of all, in various countries, just so you know, freedom, I believe it's freedominfo.org or freedomofinfo.org, and it's that's a website that sort of shows you what all the other countries aside from the U.S. that have open government policies, freedom of information laws that are out there. So you can learn about what those laws are in various countries. One thing that I did when I first started filing FOIA requests is I actually started reading other requests. I started reading the requests that other people would file. I started reading the FOIA logs. Government agencies will often post in their FOIA reading rooms the logs, and those logs are basically all the requests that come in, and they log them, and you can see what people are asking for. So if you and each request will have a case number. So if you look at that case number or take a bunch of case numbers and you can ask for everything that person asked for, you'll get an idea of what a request looks like. But the first place you should go is actually the Department of Justice Office of Information Policy to get some information on the FOIA law here in the U.S. The other place you should go just for great tips and an introduction into FOIA is the FOIA Ombudsman. I believe it may be FOIA.gov, but I'm not entirely sure. So just type in FOIA Ombudsman into Google, and that gives you a great introduction into what FOIA is, how it works, what a sample request looks like. Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, another great resource, and they actually provide some templates to assist you, and they'll advise you on the various laws on the federal level as well as the state level. And what's also great is Sean, one of our who asked a question earlier. Sean works for Muckrock. Muckrock is a portal and online. Muckrock's a news organization that allows people to file requests. They sort of make the process a bit easier. And they post all of the they post their documents. They also post all of the requests that people are filing. So really, again, this is just a matter of reading requests that other people write, trying to find out as much about the topic that you're interested in. Try to get as much info about that before you eventually write that letter and send in your request. But those would be important tools. And another note is that anyone can file a request, a FOIA request here in the U.S. You don't have to be a citizen of the United States. So it doesn't matter if you live in Egypt, if you live in Korea, doesn't matter. Japan, wherever. You can file a request here and ask for any documents.
Hey, that's great to know. I got two more questions if you have time for them.
Ask away.
One, yeah, man. First question is, what are some of the key flaws with the current FOIA laws? I mean, how do you, and what are the sort of main hurdles that need to be leaped over. What kind of changes in the law would you like to see as someone who's been involved and engaged with the FOIA process for a long time?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And let me just say that I invest a lot of time in the Freedom of Information Act, and just to hit on this quickly, one of the reasons that I aggressively use FOIA, particularly to cover the issues that I cover, which is national security, civil liberties, counterterrorism, is because first I don't want to use anonymous sources, and the people that that have become my sources that know about these issues, they are afraid that if they reveal any details to me, they'll be prosecuted, that this administration will go after them. So there's a chill in the community of certainly intelligence officials and people that might be aware of what the government is doing. So I still need to write about these issues. So that's why I turn to FOIA to try to pry loose some of these documents that would help shed light on it. And then go back to some of these sources and perhaps once you get those secrets out, they would be more inclined to speak. But as I hit on earlier, this exemption known as the withhold it because you can exemption, which is B5, and that is something that we've seen the government use time and again. The exemption 5, it means that that documents can be withheld if they pertain to what's known as the deliberative process, the behind-the-scenes decision-making process where various individuals and government agencies may communicate with each other, that may provide some candid advice. Draft documents. Draft documents are great because you get to see sort of the process of what these agencies will go through before they reach a final talking point. Those are often withheld under B5, and we've seen a massive increase in this exemption being cited to withhold documents. So, and when they do cite that, it's withheld forever. Now, the new law, the proposed new law that Congress is working on would actually set a time limit. With those documents would be able to be released after, say, 25 years. And so I certainly hope that happens because it would certainly be a boon for historians and journalists to look back, say, 25 years ago and get some documents that may have been withheld. Again, national security is cited time and again for withholding certain material. The government agencies will say grave harm or threat to national security will take place if they were to reveal information. Would be great if the law was changed where these agencies had to show the actual harm that would take place if they were to reveal this information. But in addition to that, really what I'd like to see is the Justice Department's Office of Information Policy. They're sort of the FOIA cop. They're supposed to make sure that all of the government agencies are adhering to guidelines that Attorney General Eric Holder wrote back in 2009, and to make sure they're complying with it. So the simplest thing they could do is enforce it, and they're not doing that, and that's why we're starting to see a real increase in FOIA lawsuits. And here at Vice News, we've got more than nearly actually 24 lawsuits on the federal level against various agencies. That's the long answer.
Hey man, thank you. Last thing that I was wondering, and I asked this on behalf of there's a nonprofit that I work for based in Egypt. So it's called the Egyptian American Rule of Law Association. We're kind of a right to law group. We advocate for transparency and accountability, but the idea that everybody should be held accountable before the law. That no one should be exempted. And so one of our first big initiatives is to try to prepare for a FOIA legislation to go through the Egyptian parliament. And unfortunately, we don't have a parliament right now. There's been certain courts that struck down there was supposed to be a parliamentary election like a couple of weeks ago. Courts struck it down. But I guess the point is that, what advice would you have? If we're going to start the whole FOIA system from beginning, I mean, what are some of the key what are some of the key aspects of a FOIA law that would have to be required?
That's a really great question. And as I mentioned, again, freedominfo.org will give you insight into the various other countries and how these laws were enacted. This is really something that will take place on in terms of lobbying. I mean, this is where you certainly have to lobby the government, perhaps even the State Department. The State Department here in the U.S. They try to enforce or try to get other governments to enact press freedoms, press freedom laws. What I would advise you to do, though, is actually take a look at Yemen. A few years ago, Yemen, which is in quite a bit of turmoil now, as we all know, they enacted a robust freedom of information law. This is incredible. It totally floated under the radar. And the lobbying that took place, there were many groups that worked together along with some diplomatic channels and I believe some nonprofit groups to get the previous government in Yemen to enact this freedom of information law. And it worked, and they did it. In fact, I think it was about 7 or 8 months ago, I filed a request in Yemen. I highly doubt that I'll get anything at this point, considering what's taking place there. But just trying to get some insight into drone strikes. Just wanted to see what would come back. It's Ministry of Information was handles all that. But if you take a look at what Yemen did and look at that model, particularly at that time, they don't have the greatest press freedom laws in place, but they did pass a freedom of information law. And try to duplicate that, or at least take a look at as to how they came about in enacting that law. I think that would be hugely beneficial to you and citizens of Egypt.
Hey, I'll definitely take a look at some of the comparative examples.
Thanks for your question. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for sharing, man.
Good to see you.
Okay, hey Jason, you made it to the very end of the show. How you feeling?
This is great.
Yeah, so I know you got a bunch of stuff coming out. What should people be watching for?
Look for a couple of Guantanamo stories. I've been working on something for about 2 years now. Again, aggressively using the Freedom of Information Act to try to shed light on the operations behind the scenes at Guantanamo. And finally, just got the last batch of documents a few weeks ago. And this is a story that will provide the unprecedented look at what took place, what takes place behind the scenes at Guantanamo. I've never seen anything like this in the 13 years that Guantanamo has been open. Have some other stories on the Bo Bergdahl Taliban 5 swap coming up. Some CIA-related stories, again, heavily reliant on FOIA there, and more down the road.
All right, man. Why don't you say goodbye to everybody at home?
Thanks to everyone for chiming in, and you could catch me on Twitter if you have any questions related to FOIA.
When we visited Guantanamo Bay, we had hoped to get a feel for what life is like for its detainees. But our very restricted tour raised more questions than answers.
Are you able to tell us what they're in here for?
No, I cannot tell you that, ma'am.
Obviously, we're getting away from the questions on Article 6, so I guess that'll be the end of the tour.